Hi, I'm Dr. Sean Ranganathan, and this is a yoga philosophy video. And our topic today is Yoga Sutra Book 1, What is Yoga? So this is the first in a four-part series of bite-sized introductions to the Yoga Sutra. So each video is going to cover a book of the Yoga Sutra, and it gives you a taste of what my students wrestle with in a philosophical course on the Yoga Sutra. All right, so book 1 is titled the Samadhi-pāda. Okay, and so the word samadhi breaks down into sam and adi, and so it means samadhi means with the ancient or with the original. So this is the book about the original, about being with the original reality of your life. The first sutra, the Yoga Sutra, translates into diving into yoga. Okay, so diving into yoga is about being with the original. That's the kind of theme, right? So when you throw yourself into yoga, you are coming back to some type of very basic or original reality of what you are. Okay, now yoga itself is described in Sutra 2 of Book 1 as the control of the moral or ethical character of thought, or the control of the contents of the mind. Okay? All right, so why is this important? Why is it important to control the mind? So in ordinary life, we live as though our mind is a kind of barrier or absolute limit to the possible. Okay, so the mind, the way the Yoga Sutra talks about it, is everything outside of your body, right? It's everything outside of your skin. In an ordinary state, we treat this external reality as a kind of ultimate barrier to our choosing. And ironically, this limitation arises because we identify with what's outside of our skin as though it's the contents of some kind of private or subjective mind. And this gives rise to propositional attitudes of hope, belief, fear, or anger. Okay? But when we relate to the contents of our mind this way, through these attitudes, we actually give up control over our mind because we treat it as a thing to be believed, to be feared, to be scared of, right? But when really, it's just the contents of the external world, right? Which can change on the basis of our choices. So when we live unyogically, we treat this external fact about reality as though it's something beyond our intervention, that we can't do anything to change it. Okay? Now, yoga is about taking control of these contents, not as the boundary of our life, okay, but something to be controlled, right? When we take responsibility for our relationship to topics and objects, what we can discuss about, that constitute the external world, right? We're engaging in yoga. So the unyogic way to live is to simply have beliefs and fears or worries and hopes about the way things are. To be engaged in yoga is to actually throw yourself into the world. And what that does, of course, is that it changes your relationships to the things that you had beliefs or fears or worries about. Okay, so yoga is about moving from a state of passivity, where you're not active or engaged in life, to an active state. Okay, now yoga then gets us back to the reality or the fact of what we are, because what we really are agents, distinct from our experiences. Okay, and in order for us to transform our life, where we no longer live it passively but actively, right, we have to be devoted to the ideal of being a person. And so this is where Ishvara, or the Lord, comes in. So what it is to be a person is itself already to abstract from the contingencies of your life. And then Ishvara is a kind of higher order abstraction of what it is to be a person. Okay, and potentially defines Ishvara in terms of two characteristics. It's untouched by past choices and affliction. So what this means then is that it's free to move past its past choices. So it's not stuck in the past. And it's also moving into a future that's receptive to it, that is not an obstacle to it. So to be devoted to Ishvara is to practice leaving trouble behind and moving into a future that is receptive to us. Okay. So Patanjali says a few interesting things about Ishvara. Ishvara is an abstraction unbound by time and space, the original teacher, the topic of the chapter. Okay. Devotion to Ishvara is a practice of perfecting our own lordliness. And I'm just going to give you an analogy in case you feel like this is a bit weird, right? Consider what it is to learn music. To learn music is to be devoted to a practice, or rather to engage in a practice of devotion to the ideal of music or musicality. And so at first, when we start to practice this devotion to the ideal of music, we're not very good at it, and so we're not making music. But what happens is that as we engage in this practice of devotion to the ideal of music, we start to become musical, and then all of a sudden we start to embody and perform the very traits of the ideal that we were devoted to. And so Ishvara is the ideal of what it is to be a person, right? To be not stuck in the past, to be free to move forward. And so in being involved in a practice of devotion to Ishvara is about working on ourselves as people who increasingly exemplify these traits of not being stuck in the past and free to move forward into a future that's receptive to us. Okay, so that's a very short overview of book 1 of the Yoga Sutra. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm excited to learn what you thought about this, so please leave a comment below. Thanks.